In PvP, it is not enough to master your own class, you also need to know your enemy. So today I will go over the 13 most important abilities and buffs that you need to know in order to outplay your opponents in PvP. And we're starting with Sniper. And Sniper has two abilities that you need to know. The first one being Entrench. So Entrench basically makes a sniper immune to stuns, pulls and all other CC, and also gives them 60% damage reduction versus AoE attacks. It looks like this, so you get this little extra part on top of your normal cover. The buff looks like this. That means they're immune to all stuns. This is how the normal cover looks, so without the little thing on top. They are already immune to pulls and leaps, but you can stun them, which pulls them out of cover and makes them vulnerable. So if the sniper has Entrench, basically don't waste your stuns, hit them with single target abilities instead of AoEs, and try to line of sight them until Entrench is down and stun them afterwards. And the second ability that's important for snipers is specific to their engineering spec. And if you have been watching this channel, then you will know that engineering snipers have one of the craziest bursts in the game right now. And in order to use it, they need to combo 3 abilities. Interrogation Probe is usually the first one. And the sniper can only have it active on one target at a time. So if you see this icon in your debuffs, let's say you are the target dummy, if you see this little yellow icon in your debuffs, then you can expect that within the next 2 global cooldowns, you will be bursted. Because next, the sniper will put Explosive Probe on you. So if you see these 2 debuffs, it's time to use a defensive cooldown. Be aware that Force Barrier or Shroud, for example, do not cleanse Explosive Probe. So the Explosive Probe will stay on you and you will only delay the burst by a few seconds by using those. There are 2 ways to counter the sniper burst. The first one is simply to use a damage reduction or absorb cooldown. So that could be your energy shield if you're playing Merc or PowerTech, or for example, ballistic dampers if you're playing sniper. And the second way is to outrange them, because as long as the sniper has interrogation and explosive probe on you, they can detonate it with EMP discharge, even if you're not in their line of sight. So running around the corner will not save you, but if you are more than 35 meters away, then they cannot detonate it and the burst will be wasted. So the best way to counter the sniper burst is to use your mobility, get out of range of the sniper if you can. So use Phase Walk, Mad Dash and something like this, and they will have wasted their most powerful weapon. Every Juggernaut that knows what they are doing will spec into War Master, which gives them 4 seconds of CC immunity and 20% damage reduction for 4 seconds after their leap. This is how it looks. So you can see the buff icon here and this little swirly thing around you. So if a Juggernaut jumps to you, don't try to use your knockback, don't waste your stun. The Juggernaut will be immune for 4 seconds, so that's roughly 3 global cooldowns. Instead, stay calm, use an escape if you can, force speed, something like this. Keep doing damage to them, and if they decide to stick to you, after you have used 3 abilities, your 4th one can be a stun or a knockback. If a PowerTech opens up on you, then that's kind of a good and bad news situation. The good news is PowerTechs are a cooldown-based class, so if you know how to counterplay the cooldowns, they are not nearly as scary. Bad news, they can still kill you, sometimes even if you play perfectly. Now the main thing you need to be aware of is Explosive Fuel. And that one gives them 25% crit for 15 seconds, but it does have a lengthy cooldown of roughly 1 minute and 50 seconds. And 25% crit maybe does not sound like a lot, but believe me, it makes a big difference to your damage output. If you see this little animation and you see this yellow buff icon, then you are in trouble. And if you do see that, you need to use a defensive right away. Don't think you can be tough and tank it and survive. Unless you're a tank, that's not gonna happen. So use a damage reduction cooldown, use an immunity or a reflect before the PowerTech sends you to the respawn. The second important ability to counterplay on PowerTech is Thermal Detonator. Now the burst of APPT comes from fuel combined with shoulder cannons, energy burst, and Thermal Detonator. Now the first 3 you can only mitigate, but not really outplay, since they are instant and of course top targeted. But Thermal Detonator is outplayable and is actually quite easy if you know how it works. So the thing that you need to know is that Thermal Detonator will explode 3.4 seconds after the PT puts it on you. You can see the animation when they throw it, and you can even hear it when they put it on you. So, if you hear that beeping, then you know that you are about to be bursted. Make sure you turn up your sound FX volume to hear this easier. If you notice that you have thermal detonator on you, just pop a defensive latest 1 global cooldown after you see it on you. If the PT is good and has watched my guide, then he will combine the burst combo with Carbonize, meaning that you will be stunned as the detonator goes off and you'll be unable to use most of your defenses. So make sure to be quick on your CC breaker or use a defensive cooldown as soon as you see and hear the thermal detonator on you, so that you have the defensive cooldown up before you get stunned. If you are playing sniper, then you can roll the thermal detonator, because covered escape makes you immune to all damage during and shortly after you roll. So if you time it right, that means 2 globals after you get hit with the thermal detonator, you will take no damage and the PT will be very annoyed. Same thing works on operative, of course. The main thing to know for outplaying assassin is that most of their burst comes from Shadowcraft and will happen in the first 6 seconds after they open on you. So most assassins will combo something like this. They will stun you, they will burst you, do another burst, and that is already a lot of damage, as you can see. So if you see an assassin open on you, make sure to pop a defensive as soon as possible. However, if the assassin is good and they have watched my Deception Masterclass, where I explain exactly how to open properly, then you need to make sure not to break the Molt Spike, which is a 2-second hard stun, not to break the low slash, but to wait for the 3rd stun, which is the long stun, the electrocute. So the assassin will open on you, something like this. Don't break this stun, tank this one, and then break this stun. Only when you see the electrocute animation, which is very recognizable, and you are stunned for 4 seconds, that is when you use your CC breaker. Of course, if you're playing sorcerer or sniper, you can use phase walk to teleport away to a safe spot. And the second thing to know to outplay assassins is that if they are specced into dark stability, then deflection will give them a 6-second immunity to all stuns, sleeps, lifts, and other incaps. So if you see them pop deflection and have this buff, that's the dark stability buff, last for 6 seconds. So more or less 4 global cooldowns you cannot attack them. And when the deflection buff is about halfway gone, then you can safely stun them and burst them through. Similar to assassins, marauders also can spec into a stun immunity after using a defensive cooldown. For marauders, it sits here at level 64. How it works is that they are immune to all stuns for 6 seconds after activating Saber Ward. So Saber Ward, of course, looks like this. And look at the little buff icon, this red thingy here. Again, it lasts for half the duration of Saber Ward. So 6 out of 12 seconds they are not stunnable. But Marauder has a 2nd stun immunity, and that's depending on which spec they choose to play. So most Marauders these days play Carnage in PvP. And the CC immunity of Carnage is called Blood Frenzy. This one can happen once every 30 seconds. It also lasts for 6 seconds, so roughly 4 global cooldowns. And the buff looks like a little fist. You can see it here, comes from Ferocity. So if that happens, don't stun them, don't waste your CC, just count to 4, and after 4 global cooldowns you can safely CC them. For Fury Marauders, the CC immunity is called Gravity Vortex. It looks like this, so this kind of red vortex here, and it comes from Force Crush. So when the Marauder uses Force Crush, they will have this little red buff here. That means they are immune to stuns for 6 seconds. Same thing as Carnage, don't stun them in that time, just pop a defensive or kite away from them, and after 4 global cooldowns you can safely CC them. Main thing you need to know about outplaying operatives is how evasion works. So evasion has a rather short cooldown of 1 minute that can be reduced if they talent into it, and it basically makes you immune to all white damage for 7 seconds. So that's an incredibly long immunity. To make matters worse, operatives can also spec into Reflect. So the blow for blow talent level 73 makes it so whenever they take direct single target damage, so that would be a PowerTech burst for example, this will also reflect back 150% of the yellow damage which they take. That makes it so PowerTechs can easily one-shot themselves on you. If you're a PowerTech, there is not too much you can do except not to attack into evasion if they have this buff. But one weakness of operatives is hard stunts. Because if you didn't know, if a character in this game is hard stunned, then they cannot defend themselves or dodge attacks. And that is true for the evasion buff as well. So stun the operative, and even though they have evasion up, they will take full damage. Also, operatives don't have any cooldown that they can use while they are stunned. So that is how you can outplay them. Now, mercenaries have a variety of abilities that I could talk about, but I feel like the most important thing to outplay them is not hitting into Reflect or Energy Shield. For Reflect, I think that should be fairly obvious. Reflect, well, its official name is Responsive Safeguards, absorbs all incoming direct damage, and heals the mercenary for 50% of the absorbed damage. So if you're hitting into this ability, which is quite hard to miss, you will be healing the mercenary. So don't do that. And the second ability that you should not hit into is, of course, Energy Shield if the mercenary has specced into Trauma Regulators, which makes it so every time they take damage under Energy Shield, they will build a stack of Trauma Regulator. And that in turn makes it so when your Energy Shield expires, each of those stacks will heal them for 4% of your maximum health. So if the mercenary is glowing blue like this, then it's better to swap the target and don't hit them, because if you hit them, most likely you will just give them a huge heal at the end of the energy shield. The main thing to outplay sorcerers is playing around Polarity Shift. Now, Polarity Shift by default makes it so sorcerers are immune to interrupts, they get free alacrity for 10 seconds, but currently every sorcerer is running Gathering Storm, which makes it so while Polarity Shift is active, all force attacks, which is basically all of their attacks, will deal 20% more damage. So you have more damage, 20% faster, and you're immune to interrupts. But on top of that, many sorcerers are also running Surging Speed, which makes it so that Polarity Shift now also gives you 100% movement speed, which turns Sorcerer into the fastest moving class in the game. So basically, if you see this icon and the Sorcerer is casting on you, or you see this animation around them, then best not to fight them, pop a defensive to mitigate the incoming burst that you can expect if they're casting on you, and don't chase them, because unless you have a CC, 100% movement speed is really too much to keep up with. That's it for today, guys. If you want to see any other classes or maybe the Republic version of this guide, let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you found this guide helpful and you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.